Hello, my name is Nisha Noor and welcome to Millennium Headlines. This week's top headlines are: Islamic State linked to worst mass shooting in U.S. history. At least 8 people dead in suicide bombings in Damascus suburb. Muslims stand united with LGBT community. Obama says Orlando shooting was act of terror and hate. Sanders to meet with Clinton on Tuesday after final Democratic primary. President Obama's weekly address. Now the details to this week's top headlines. The heavily armed assailant who killed 50 people in a packed nightclub early Sunday in the deadliest shooting spree in U.S. history pledged allegiance to the Islamic State before he was killed in a hail of gunfire, authorities said. Federal authorities identified the shooter as Omar Mateen, 29, a New York-born resident of Fort Pierce, Florida, who worked for the security firm G4S. FBI Special Agent Ronald Hopper said Mateen made allusions to the Islamic State in a communication with law enforcement before he was killed by police. Hopper said agents had investigated Mateen in 2013 and again in 2014 regarding terror threats, but lacked sufficient evidence in both cases to pursue charges. Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer said another 53 people were wounded at Pulse Orlando, a gay club just south of downtown. Tonight, our community witnessed a horrific crime that will have a lasting effect on our community, a solemn Dyer said. We will not be defined by a hateful shooter. We will be defined by how we love each other. President Obama called the massacre an attack of terror and an attack of hate. Orlando Police Chief John Mina says the tragedy began unfolding at 2:02 a.m., where three police officers engaged the suspect in a gun battle outside the club. A hostage situation then took place inside, and a SWAT team was called in, Nina said. Police received updates from patrons trapped in the club and decided to storm the club at about 5 a.m.
There were more victims inside than originally thought. So once it was safe for us to go in and we determined there were no devices, that's when we were able to discover how many victims were actually in there. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, 50 victims in one location, one shooting. It's absolutely one of the worst tragedies we've seen. And not only for the city, but for our entire nation. We believe this is a tragedy that could happen anywhere in the United States of America. And what we need to do is continue to be vigilant and call. If you see something, say something, and call anyone. Call 911, call the FBI. If you see something that's out of place or you see someone that's acting strange behavior.
Obama, in a brief speech to the nation, said the crime shows once again how easy it is for someone to get a weapon for use in a mass killing. He also expressed condolences to the families of the victims. The White House said Obama was getting updates on the case from Homeland Security. The place where they were attacked was more than a nightclub. It was a place of solidarity and empowerment where people came together to raise awareness, he said. Governor Rick Scott declared a state of emergency for Orange County. "We don't want this to happen anywhere in the world," Scott said. "It's devastating when you see how many people lost their lives and the impact on their families." Mohammed Mushri, president of the Islamic Society of Central Florida, thanked law enforcement officials for their efforts and cautioned against any rush to judgment because the alleged killer was a Muslim, according to media reports. At least 8 people were killed and more than a dozen injured Saturday in suicide bomb attacks in predominantly Shiite suburb of Damascus. The Syrian news agency Sana said the blast in the Sayyida Zainab area just south of Damascus killed 8 people and wounded 13. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 20 people were killed and dozens were wounded in the 2 explosions. Police said Sana that the first blast at the entrance to the town came from a suicide attacker wearing an explosive belt. The second blast was from a booby-trapped car in the town itself. The Islamic State extremist group claims responsibility for the bombings through its Amaq news agency, which said there were 3 attacks, 2 by suicide bombers and 1 by a car bomb. The Damascus suburb is home to the heavily guarded Sayyida Zainab shrine, one of the holiest in Shiite Islam. The shrine to Sayyida Zainab, the daughter of the first Shiite Imam Ali and granddaughter of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, receives thousands of Shiite pilgrims each year. Video of the blast site broadcast on Syrian state TV shows several vehicles and shops on fire and at least 2 heavily damaged buildings. Bloodstains could be seen on the debris-covered road. Sana quoted Prime Minister Wael al-Halki as blaming Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar for being behind the brutal massacres. The 3 countries are main supporters of the Syrian opposition trying to remove President Bashar Assad from power. Sayyida Zainab has been a frequent target of suicide and car bombings in Syria's civil war. Now in its 6th year, some of them have been claimed by the Islamic State group, the Associated Press reported. On April 25th, 8 people died when a suicide bomber detonated his explosive-packed vehicle in a military checkpoint in the suburb. In February, a series of blasts ripped through Sayyida Zainab, killed at least 83 people and wounding more than 170. U.S. Muslim leaders condemned the attack on a gay nightclub in Orlando that killed 50 people, injuring at least 50 more. The Council on American-Islamic Relations called the attack a hate crime and said the group had no tolerance for extremism.
We offer condolences to the families, and we pray for the recovery of the survivors. This is a hate crime, plain and simple. We condemn it in the strongest possible terms. It violates our principles as Americans and as Muslims. Let me be clear. We have no tolerance for extremism of any kind. We must not tolerate hateful rhetoric that incites violence against minorities. Religious freedom is the cornerstone of our beliefs as Muslims and as Americans. Today, we must stand united. For many years, members of the LGBTQIA community have stood shoulder to shoulder with the Muslim community against any acts of hate crimes, Islamophobia, marginalization, and discrimination. Today, we stand with them, shoulder to shoulder. The liberation of the American Muslim community is profoundly linked to the liberation of other minority groups, blacks, Latinos, gay, Jewish, trans, and every other community that has faced discrimination and oppression in this country. We heard in the news that the alleged perpetrator called in and he pledged allegiance to Daesh, or as we call it, ISIS. I have a word for ISIS and their supporters. How would you stand before God and answer to your crimes against innocent people, thousands of innocent people, Muslims, Christians, and other minorities? You do not speak for us. You do not represent us. You are an aberration. You are an outlaw.
President Obama delivered the remarks after a shooting at a gay nightclub in Orlando. Florida left more than 100 people dead and wounded.
Today, as Americans, we grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people. We pray for their families who are grasping for answers with broken hearts. We stand with the people of Orlando who have endured a terrible attack on their city. Although it's still early in the investigation, we know enough to say that this was an act of terror and an act of hate. And as Americans, we are united in grief, in outrage, and in resolve to defend our people. I just finished a meeting with FBI Director Comey and my Homeland Security and National Security advisors. The FBI is on the scene and leading the investigation in partnership with local law enforcement. I've directed that the full resources of the federal government be made available for this investigation. We are still learning all the facts. This is an open investigation. We've reached no definitive judgment on the precise motivations of the killer. The FBI is appropriately investigating this as an act of terrorism, and I've directed that we must spare no effort to determine what, if any, inspiration or association this killer may have had with terrorist groups. What is clear is that he was a person filled with hatred. Over the coming days, we will uncover why and how this happened, and we will go wherever the facts lead us. This morning I spoke with my good friend Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, and I conveyed to him the deepest condolences of the American people. This could have been any one of our communities. So I told Mayor Dyer that whatever help he and the people of Orlando need, they are going to get it. As a country, we will be there for the people of Orlando today, tomorrow, and for all the days to come. We also express our profound gratitude to all the police and first responders who rushed to harm's way. Their courage and professionalism saved lives and kept the carnage from being even worse. It's the kind of sacrifice that our law enforcement professionals make every single day for all of us, and we can never thank them enough. This is an especially heartbreaking day for all of our friends, our fellow Americans who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. The shooter targeted a nightclub where people came together to be with friends, to dance and to sing and to live. The place where they were attacked is more than a nightclub. It is a place of solidarity and empowerment where people have come together to raise awareness, to speak their minds, and to advocate for their civil rights. So this is a sobering reminder that attacks on any American, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, is an attack on all of us and on the fundamental values of equality and dignity that define us as a country. And no act of hate or terror will ever change who we are or the values that make us Americans. Today marks the most deadly shooting in American history. The shooter was apparently armed with a handgun and a powerful assault rifle. This massacre is therefore a further reminder of how easy it is for someone to get their hands on a weapon that lets them shoot people in a school or in a house of worship or a movie theater or in a nightclub. And we have to decide if that's the kind of country we want to be. And to actively do nothing is a decision as well. In the coming hours and days, we'll learn about the victims of this tragedy. Their names, their faces, who they were, the joy that they brought to families and to friends, and the difference that they made in this world. Say a prayer for them, and say a prayer for their families. That God give them the strength to bear the unbearable, and that He give us all the strength to be there for them, and the strength and courage to change. We need to demonstrate that we are defined more as a country by the way they live their lives than by the hate of the man who took them from us. As we go together, we will draw inspiration from heroic and selfless acts. Friends who helped friends, took care of each other, and saved lives. In the face of hate and violence, we will love one another. We will not give in to fear or turn against each other. Instead, we will stand united as Americans to protect our people and defend our nation and to take action against those who threaten us. May God bless the Americans we lost this morning. May He comfort their families. May God continue to watch over this country that we love. Thank you.
Bernie Sanders said Sunday that he will meet with presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton on Tuesday evening to discuss what kind of presidency she will have if she wins the White House. Sanders wanted to wait until the final presidential primary campaign in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday was over before talking to her about how he can help her beat presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump. Clinton last week stood up the majority of delegates even before winning big victories in California and New Jersey to become the presumptive Democratic nominee, though Sanders remains in the race. Sanders said on ABC's This Week that he will talk to Clinton about a progressive platform for the Democratic National Convention and if she wins, what kinds of administrative she will have and whether or not she will stand up forcefully for working families. Sanders said he wants to help shape a Democratic platform that includes higher taxes on large corporations and billionaires, tuition-free public colleges and universities, a stronger effort to combat climate change, and a massive jobs program to put millions of people back to work. The Vermont senator said he hopes to transform the Democratic Party from raising money from the wealthy to listening to a declining middle class. Sanders promised to do whatever he can to help defeat Trump. It is incomprehensible to me that in 2016 that this man, Donald Trump, is running his campaign based on biography, Sanders said on ABC. I will do everything I can to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president of the United States. As his campaign nears its end, Sanders said he is especially proud of attracting the majority of young voters in the Democratic primary contest. In this week's address, President Obama discussed the crippling economic crisis harming 3.5 million Americans in Puerto Rico. Today, the island is spending over a third of its tax revenue on debt payments, and on July 1st, Puerto Rico is facing another $2 billion in debt payments that it cannot make.
Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk with you about the crisis in Puerto Rico. and why it matters to all of us. Puerto Ricans are American citizens, just like folks in Maine or Oklahoma or New Mexico. And over the last decade, Puerto Rico has suffered through a deep and painful recession. But unlike the rest of the United States, it hasn't recovered. Today, the island continues to face a crippling economic crisis. Schools are closing, power is being cut off at homes and hospitals. Teachers have to choose between turning on the lights or turning on the computers. Doctors can't get medicine to treat newborns unless they pay in cash. And as the Zika virus threatens both the island and the mainland, workers dealing with mosquito control to help protect women and their unborn babies are at risk of being laid off. Right now, Puerto Rico is spending about a third of its tax revenue on debt payments, far more than anywhere else in America. And on July 1st, the island faces another $2 billion in debt payments that it cannot pay. There's only one way for Puerto Rico to pull itself out of this crisis, and that's by restructuring its debt and finding a sustainable fiscal path toward growth and opportunity for its people. But here's the problem. Right now, Puerto Rico doesn't have the tools it needs to restructure its debt. Tools available elsewhere in America. And only Congress can fix the problem and put Puerto Rico on a path to recovery. Thankfully, this week, the House overwhelmingly passed a bipartisan bill to address the crisis. And I now urge the Senate to move quickly to follow suit. This bill won't cost federal taxpayers a dime. It doesn't include special interest bailouts, and it gives Puerto Rico the ability to restructure its debt, safeguard essential services, and provide important protections to public pensions that more than 300,000 folks rely on to retire with dignity. This bill also includes something else, a temporary system of oversight to help implement needed reforms and ensure transparency. I know that some folks in Puerto Rico are worried about this kind of oversight, but I've always insisted that any solution to this crisis has to respect the democratic rights of the people of Puerto Rico. And I'm committed to making sure that Puerto Ricans are well represented in this process so that we can be sure we're taking steps that are in the island's best interests. This bill is not a perfect solution. Nobody's saying it is. That's what happens in divided government. But it's the only option on the table to save Puerto Rico from spiraling out of control. And that's exactly what would happen if Congress fails to do its job. There's no question this is a trying time for folks in Puerto Rico. They've seen too many jobs lost and too many neighbors leave in search of better opportunity elsewhere. It's clear that it's time for Puerto Rico to chart a new course and make a fresh start. This bill is just a first step. We all have more work to do to make sure that the people of Puerto Rico receive the health care they deserve and the good jobs and economic opportunities they need to build a better future for their kids. And I want the people of Puerto Rico to know that my administration is committed to your success because you're vital to America's success. That's what this is all about. We don't turn our backs on our fellow Americans. We don't treat folks differently because of where they live. Instead, we treat each other as Americans. We come together, especially when it's hard. That's how we've always set ourselves on a course toward a brighter day. Thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Islamic State linked to worst mass shooting in U.S. history. At least 8 people dead in suicide bombings in Damascus suburb. Muslims stand united with LGBT community. Obama says Orlando shooting was act of terror and hate. Sanders to meet with Clinton on Tuesday after final Democratic primary. President Obama's weekly address. Again, this has been Nisha Noor, and thank you for watching William Hill Lines. See you next week.